Everyone. My name is Todd Hull, and I am an associate professor in the Department of English at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies in Seoul, South Korea. The title of my presentation today is Addressing the Needs of Multi-Level Students with Similar Educational Backgrounds. First of all, I want to talk about multi-level classrooms and how they differ around the world. So by multi-level classrooms, I of course mean classrooms in which there are students of differing levels, differing abilities, different proficiencies in the target language. There are ESL contexts in quote-unquote inner circle English-speaking countries such as the US, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. For various reasons, you may have learners in the same classroom that are absolute beginners and quite advanced. This is something that happens more often in these quote-unquote inner circle countries. On the other hand, there are university general English classes for freshmen in East Asian countries such as Japan and South Korea. Now, in these classrooms, learners have a more standardized background and more uniform proficiency in English. This is due to a more uniform curriculum that is at the national level in countries like this. So students come in with similar educations there. Now, they have more uniform proficiency, but it's more uniform with the receptive skills of listening and reading rather than the productive skills of speaking and writing. And that's to be expected since the receptive skills are easier to acquire than the productive skills of speaking and writing. So what do we do with this particular situation? Well, one way to take advantage of this is providing learners with standardized input, such as a single reading passage for the whole class. So, as I mentioned, they have similar educational backgrounds. That means they have a similar lexicon. They know a similar number of vocabulary words, they know the similar grammar points and things like that. So you can give the whole class the same text. Then what you can do is you can allow individual learners to personalize their output according to their individual levels. And that gives them the freedom to produce the language at their own levels. Just a couple of quick notes about learner-centered language practice in the multi-level classroom. Dana Moss put it well when she summarized the communicative classroom by saying that, quote, the teacher is the initiator of action. That does not mean the teacher is always in control of the discourse. So in modern communicative classrooms, they are not classrooms where the teacher stands at front and talks for the entirety of the class and the students are expected to absorb the material. It is an interactive class, not one of passive learning. Also, it turns out that lower level learners develop greater proficiency when interacting with higher level learners. So lower level learners can actually benefit from multi-level classrooms. But as I mentioned before, the multi-level classrooms of East Asia are not quite as multi-level as they are in the quote-unquote inner circle countries like the USA and Canada. Before we talk about the East Asian context upon which this presentation will focus the most, let's just quickly review some of the ways that of catering to different levels in ESL contexts with great variation. So one of the ways that instructors deal with this situation is to actually group learners according to their level. So they'll put the beginners together, they'll put intermediates together, and they'll put higher levels together. And this has indeed proven effective for some of these ESL contexts that I mentioned before. Another way is called differentiated instruction. So in this case, instructors can see and decide what each individual learner needs and try to give them personalized materials that are a good match with their goals and their abilities. Now, on to the main focus of this presentation, multi-level learners in the East Asian University context. As I mentioned before, in this context, there is a generally uniform pre-university English education. So in this case, there's no need to group beginners with beginners, intermediates with intermediates, etc. Any learner in the class can partner up with any other learner in the class. That is one of the unique advantages of this situation. So the main method for addressing the needs of multi-level classes advocated in this presentation is to choose receptive material that is accessible yet challenging to the majority of the students in class. So again, their receptive skills of reading and listening are quite uniform, so you can select a text and you can be assured that every student in the text is going to be able to understand the majority of that text. And then what you do there to take advantage of the students' differing levels is in the output phase. You allow the students to personalize their output. So higher level students are able to produce higher level writing and higher level speaking, and the lower level students produce speaking and writing that is at their level. So in short, standardized receptive material, personalized productive material, or even more succinctly, standardized input, personalized output. Before I continue on to how we would actually conduct a lesson in this context, a quick note about input. How quote-unquote authentic should input be? There are some who argue that input should come directly from primary text. They say that if you provide a summary of a text, you change a text, you make the grammar more accessible, you make the vocabulary more accessible, that it is in danger of being quote-unquote unnatural or inauthentic. However, as Henry Widdowson correctly argues, language learning behavior is not necessarily the same as language using behavior. So this is in accordance with the principle of scaffolding, which provides learners with assistance on their way to being able to negotiate texts. So the way to get learners to actually learn languages, focus on the things that they need without all of the difficult distractions of a quote-unquote authentic text. So original texts, they harbor the danger of being intimidating, putting students off the material. When students have to spend hours just trying to understand the text, it's a recipe for frustration and wasting of time. So a more pedagogically sound method, what do? It's called sheltered learning. In this case, you provide students with material that contains all the important information from the original without all of the debilitating distractions and difficulties of the original. So comprehensive input. What you want is comprehensive input. You don't want frustrating complexity. Now, of course, for learners who wish, you can always link to the primary texts, and they can peruse those if they want to. Okay, what do we do in the classroom? Well, first of all, as usual, select topics and texts that are appropriate for the teaching and learning context. And this is something that is done in every classroom, not just this particular classroom. Again, what are we talking about here? We're talking about providing the students with a summary of texts with all of the main points contained in the originals. So with these summaries, they can engage the text productively without undue frustration and wasting of time. Next, give the students comprehension questions for homework. So they have the text, you give them comprehension questions, they do the homework. This allows them to get the gist of the text, the main ideas of the text. Then you come to class, you check the answers to the comprehension questions, and that makes sure that the students have mastered the material. Once the students have mastered the material, then It's time for the students to engage with the material. This is the phase at which the students get their practice. They get practice in first writing and then speaking. And this is what we're in class for, is to give students practice. So what do they do first? They write. I give them a short paragraph because this is an in-class activity, so you don't want anything longer than a paragraph. So what you get them to do is react to the text in one of the academic formats that are useful in contexts like this. So you'll give them something like a reasons and examples paragraph, a cause and effect paragraph, an opinion with a counter argument paragraph, and they have to react to the text in that format. Next, the speaking phase. Students get together with their classmates and they discuss their ideas with their classmates. This is the all-important and the crucial speaking phase, the practice that everyone is looking for. And that is the goal of all communicative classrooms. Also included in here is listening practice. So students actually have to understand the ideas of their partner. What I do here is I require the students to take notes on their interlocutor's ideas, and this is in accordance with what Widdowson said, that language learning behavior is different than language using behavior. So of course, when you're just talking to somebody, you don't sit around taking notes. But language learning behavior, if you are required to take notes on your interlocutor's output, that requires you to focus on their ideas and really, truly understand them. And that way, students can have productive interactions about that. So that is the class there. You select the topic. You provide a summary of a text, not the original material. You make sure that students understand it. Then students have to react to it in writing, and finally they practice their speaking. So the conclusion? Take advantage of the relatively uniform pre-university English education students receive in East Asia by standardizing input and personalizing output. Summarize the material rather than giving authentic texts. Because authentic texts are frustrating, can be frustrating. And for the output phase, give the learners the freedom to choose their output formats, and also here freedom is provided for higher level learners to show what they can do. And finally, the goal of all classrooms, increase language proficiency by having learners practice the target language through interacting with classmates and discussing in discussions about the topics that are presented. So that is the way to take advantage of this unique East Asian context of learners that are multi-level, but not as multi-level as other contexts. And that is how that's how you can take advantage of this context, by standardizing input and personalizing output. After a semester of lessons like this, then one's classroom generally looks like this. Learners that are doing well, they're learning a lot, and they are happy and engaged. Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to present at this conference. I appreciate it greatly.